Hey everyone, what's up? Welcome to the Lifeonaire Show. I'm your host, Jason Wojo. I'm joined by my co-host, Peter Kola. And on the Lifeonaire Show, we talk about everything as it relates to giving you the life and the business you want, creating a life and business you love. And a lot of times this revolves around anything related to that topic. And so we could talk about business, we could talk about being profitable, we could talk about relationships, we could talk about health, we might talk about mindset. And actually, today, in fact, we are going to talk about mindset. Welcome to the show, Peter.
Well, thanks, man, for having me. Almost said everything right in that intro. Do you know what you said wrong?
Did I say Peter? What did I say, Peter Kolat?
Yeah, you said Peter Kolat. Yeah.
Okay,
I
mean, Polish Peter. Sorry, people. Peter doesn't like people knowing his real last name because he's afraid of like spam mail and identity theft.
No, I'm like a celebrity. So I mean, it has
you don't want your real name known.
What do they call a pseudonym?
Whatever. Like a surname? A synonym? Oh, yeah. A synonym. No, not a synonym. A pseudonym. A pseudonym.
That's right. Yeah, that's synonym. Right. That's what, yeah. That's
okay, yeah, you're listening to some educated guys here, clearly. All right, so listen. Today we're going to talk about mindset. And, this is a topic that we can talk about for hours or actually probably days, actually, because both Peter and I are really big on this. And the truth is that, everything for us and for you comes down to your mindset, whether you get things done, whether you get stalled out, whether you're fearful, whether you get paralyzed, whether you're happy, whether you're sad, whether what you focus on, all these things. All right. And so this is a huge, huge topic, but we're just going to talk about a little tiny chunk in this episode. And we're going to talk about it from the perspective of like how we're doing right now with the coronavirus stuff going on. It's kind of and it depends on how you look at it, but some people feel like it's the end of days and other people are like, okay, it's just another a pandemic. We've had SARS, we've had MERS, we've had avian flu virus, we've had all these other things. It's just one more episode. Why are people freaking out? And there's a whole spectrum in between that range, right? We're looking at kind of the bookends of it. And so today we're going to talk about some of the things that are influencing the way we're looking at this, some of the ways that we can perhaps cope better, some of the ways that we can maybe even help other people through this in a way that's empowering to them and identifies wherever they're at and then walks them through a more empowering, positive way to kind of navigate these times. And so, Peter, I'm really excited to be talking about this. It's very timely and very relevant. And so, what have you been seeing out there? Like, we're both on Facebook, and what are you seeing as far as people's reactions to what's going on?
Well, lots of toilet paper are being bought. That's the first thing I see.
Yeah, right. That's the most, yeah.
Yeah. But listen, all jokes aside, one of the things that I'm seeing, and people are reacting in completely different ways, right? Some people are angry, some people are sad, some people are panicking, some people are fearful, some people are going to the work mode, right? Some of my students, I've noticed that what happens is they go and they're workaholics, right, during this time. Some people are very quiet, right? They just kind of shut down. So everybody has a different reaction to what is going on. And, what happens is because of that, people start to going and looking at why are they doing this? Why are they doing that? And it's okay how you're reacting. But what I want you guys to understand is that how we are reacting is how we are reacting all the time, right? When it comes to those kinds of events, those kinds of circumstances that let's say out of our control, right? Like something like this, or even like some of the circumstances that happen in your own life that are maybe traumatic or they're kind of tough to deal with. We have this place that we go to within ourselves and how we react. So it happens all the time. So the first things that I'm talking about here is to actually get the sense and get present to the fact that how we are reacting. Right, Wojo?
Yeah. And you just reminded me of something, Peter. I think what's happening right now, yes, it is relatively, it's unprecedented. However, to Peter's point, the way you are reacting here is likely the same way you're reacting to any stressor in your life within a certain margin of error. And I kind of think of there's two times that people are really revealed in terms of how they view things. One is in times of crisis, and this reveals people's character, it reveals their thought patterns, things like that. And the other one is when in times of conquest, like when they've done really, really well. You'll see what that draws out of people as well. And so when you have these broad ends of the spectrum of everyday life experiences, from really, really tragic and tough to really, really incredible and amazing, character is revealed, mindsets and perspectives are also revealed. And so that's why we see so many different emotional reactions, and from those emotional reactions, behaviors result, right? And so the way you view these things affects, your thought pattern, your feelings, and then affects how you behave.
Right. And one of the things I've used with some of the conversations I've had over the past couple of weeks with people is that, because this is kind of like new, right, for a lot of people, how this thing, there is a quarantine, there is lockdowns and everything. So we've never had this, right? And so a lot of people don't know how to actually deal with that. So one example that I use to help them kind of understand is like, imagine like the times where you've ever been to a funeral, right? You go to a funeral and maybe you know the person or you just know of the person. But if you're standing there on the side and you're watching everybody in the room, you'll see how different people are reacting in a different way. Some people are angry, right? Why did that have to happen? Some people are sad. Some people cry. Some people, joke around, right? Because trying to make the light of the situation, try to cheer somebody up. Some people talk about the good things that this particular person done, So all of that stuff has something in common. And that is that people are trying to cope and trying to figure out how to deal with this, right? And one thing that I have learned over the years is that commonality, the coping thing, there's a positive effect that they're trying to accomplish. There's a positive thing behind it, right?
Okay. So it's coming from a good place. Like
it's coming from a good place. Yeah.
They're trying to do something positive.
Yeah. They're trying to do something positive. Yeah.
And so, for instance, let's use your analogy of a funeral. Like if someone's kind of joking around at a funeral, they are looking at this in a certain way. And actually, I think we have to be careful with that, because we could see somebody laughing at a funeral, and someone else, by the way, may see that and get incredibly like infuriated by that. Yeah. But somebody who's laughing, they could be doing that because they are really suffering internally, and this is their way of dealing with that, like making joke of a heavy situation, and that's how they cope with that. Or maybe they're laughing because, and I think to this point, you have to be careful of how we, from an outsider's perspective, I think we have to be careful of how we interpret people's actions, because that same person who's laughing, maybe they're thinking of some awesome time they had with this person, and some incredible memories they shared, and they in their heart and their mind, this person is going to heaven, and they've met their maker, and they're celebrating, right? Like maybe that's a possibility. And so, but in either case, it's a way of people reflecting what their beliefs are, and I think we just got to be careful of like assuming what we think it is, but it's still there.
That's a really good point that you mentioned, because here's the thing. Probably, I mean, statistically speaking, now this statistics part is not going to be right, but 90% of the time, most of the time, our interpretation of what we think this person is actually doing, or why they're, let's say, laughing, right, in this particular example, is mostly wrong, because we don't know how actually what's behind that, right? So what you said that it might be, the examples that you've used of why they're laughing, right? What came for me is they might be, making jokes and all that kind of stuff because they want to cheer other people up, because they see other people
That's
going
another
through the
reason,
pain.
right? Yeah.
And that's another reason, right? And here is the thing. What I want you to consider is all of these different things. People are experiencing these different things and saying and being that way. It all comes from the past experiences, right? How they've been brought up, the belief system that they have, the values that they have, right? What they're experiencing in their life. And they've learned that to deal with situations that way. For me, for instance, right? If you ever seen me in person or talked to me or seen me at the events or whatever, I'm funny as heck, right? I know Wojo probably doesn't agree. See, look at him go. See, he's
I'm not sure our listeners,
But listen, if you think about it, if you go to the event, you know that I'm the funny one, okay? But here is the thing. On the serious side of things, I've developed that funny bone kind of a thing, right? Here's the thing. As long as I think in my head that I'm funny, that's all that matters, right? So what Wojo thinks, it doesn't really matter. But I've developed that to not only, help me get through tough times, but for other people, because I saw other people, suffer, right? Like my little sister and all that kind of stuff.
Right. So you're trying to lift people up as well. And like, so,
Right.
and here's the thing too. So bringing us back to coronavirus, you see some people are posting stats of like deaths and how terrible it is, and how many people's lives are being destroyed. And those things are happening, by the way. But then you see other people that are posting funny memes and sayings, and they're more jovial and joking about it. And so it's a very different way of dealing with it. Now, with that being said, some people, and let's even talk about beliefs for a second, man. Like some people actually probably do believe that this isn't a big deal and it's just going to pass and we're going to continue. And other people truly believe like, no, this is going to like alter the rest of my life. And so some of that has to do with how you view this. And so it's not only how you've been brought up, your natural tendencies, which you've developed, right? Which you've developed in dealing with things, but it's also like how you view this specific instance. And even that is interesting because this is getting a little off topic, but regarding how you view this, a lot of it has to do with, are you jumping to conclusions, or have you actually done research? How many, like we just finished talking about how you can't assess why somebody does something. Well, how many of us have been programmed with incomplete information, and we jump to conclusions about certain things? And where is that popping up in our lives when we think and make broad sweeping generalizations about things in life when we really we haven't done the research? We don't really know. We're kind of basing this off of a limited, relatively ignorant position, actually. I mean, and not to use the word ignorant like negatively, but like, I'm ignorant in 1,000 things. Like, I don't know a lot about a lot of things. And so we make these generalizations that show up without us really having done the homework sometimes, but we just do it. It's just human nature.
Right. And I see this happen all the time, especially on social media. So one of the things that I, for myself and the people around me and the students and people, I'm like, be careful, like in these particular times, right? Be careful what you feed your mind with.
Yeah.
Right. So when it comes to those kinds of things that people are sharing, because they have all different reasons, right? Some people are sharing it because they're looking at it, this is some big conspiracy, right? So some people are sharing it because they just want to pass the information on, because from the first glance, they look at it, oh my God, this is valid, right? And they pass it on because they want to be helpful or whatever it might be. Some people are just doing it on purpose. Who knows, right? We don't know that, right? But the minute we start looking from that perspective of like, getting angry, it doesn't help anyone, right? Because of the fact that, when you are doing that, think about it this way. When you are angry, when you're upset, you can't think straight, right? It's like your brain kind of gets paralyzed in a way.
Gets hijacked,
yeah, in a way. So that, I think we can all agree that doesn't really help, because even if you're like, in an argument with your loved one or significant other, when you are angry or frustrated or, panicking or whatever, you can't think straight, right? It just gets kind of frozen. So what I'm getting at is that when it comes to this time, be careful what you feed your mind with.
Yeah.
So at that moment, you can listen, you can go and research a little bit more, go into the source, like what could be the source, and go and look at it and get the facts and get some clarity on this for yourself. Because one of the reasons why people are panicking, because there's no clarity, right? There's uncertainty. They don't know what's going to happen. We don't know what's going to happen in the future, right? And about 2-3 months ago, we kind of felt that there was some certainty to our lives. And all of a sudden, that got taken away, right? And people who value that a lot basically got that dose, really big. They got hit big time when it comes.
Well, dude, I really want to highlight kind of what you said is like, being careful what you feed your mind. Like, it's the same as feeding your body, right? Like, we know, you can't look like $1 million if you're on the dollar menu. All right. And so when you're feeding your mind with things that are anxiety provoking and that instill fear and change how you feel because listen, whatever we're exposed to, eventually we have, that has an influence on us.
Mm-hmm.
And so this isn't to say that you're ignorant about this, but you have to be cognizant and conscious of what you are actually surrounding yourself with, whether it's people, whether it's messages, whether it's any kind of influence. And along those lines, I would encourage everyone to be informed, right? This is everyday knowledge, by the way, not just speaking of what we're in right now. Be really informed with things like, and be careful of your sources of this stuff, and how that influences you. Along those lines, speaking of how things influence you, you have to realize, if there's one huge tip that I can give everybody, it's realize what you have control over and what you don't. Like, none of us right now are going to influence to any huge extent the way this is progressing. Okay, it's well past, now early on we see the results of some people not doing the right things, but here we have an option, we have a choice to realize what's within our circle of control and what's outside of that. And so there might be things we can control in our lives, and that's like, they say, the circle of control. Then just think of a bullseye target. Okay, then the next circle around there is a circle of influence. These are things that we can do something about. It's not a complete control situation, but we have some influence here, right? And this could be, for instance, an example of something within our control is, whether or not we eat that donut. Now, some of us may say that's not within my control, but theoretically, it's within our circle of control. Your circle of influence could be like someone in your family or a friend. You have an influence on them, but ultimately they're going to do their own thing. They're going to do what they want.
Right.
And then outside of that, the next circle outside of that is a circle of concern that you're worried about it, but you have, quite frankly, there's nothing you can do about it. Now, I'm not saying that. So I would say in our case, this and what we do is within our circle of influence. Like, you can stay quarantined. You can minimize your exposure. You could use hand wipes. You could use gloves. You could do all this other stuff. That's circle of influence. It's not circle of control, but it's circle of influence. And then you have, and maybe it is circle of control, I guess, to some extent, if you absolutely just didn't leave your house ever and had all the supplies you need, then maybe that would be the case. But aside from that, this is not circle of concern, because we can't control that.
Right, but I think there's an important distinction that I want to point out that you touched on is
just sneeze. Sorry, man.
Okay. Did I need to say bless you?
I'm all right. Yeah, thank you for that. Yeah.
Okay.
Right. I muted the microphone though, so no one had to listen to it.
All right, good. Thank you. That was very helpful. Okay.
And so, and no one is here to get sneezed on, by the way. So everybody, I didn't contaminate anyone.
All right. Well, I backed away from the microphone because Anyway, so there is an important thing I want to make the distinction here: the distinction between the control and influence, right? Because there is a difference.
Yeah,
it's not the same, And I think a lot of times what we fall into as human beings, we think we can control a lot of different things, or we can control other people, or we can control our circumstances, or we can control other, our situations, right? And when we start looking at it that way, most of the time we get sorely disappointed because we can't really control a lot of things, right? Your daughter is going to do whatever she's going to do. You can yell, scream, or whatever, lock her in the room and, whatever it might be, right? But when it comes to influence, now it's a kind of a different conversation, right? You can have some kind of an influence, say certain things or be a certain way with other people, and now you might get a different kind of a result out of that. So I think that's an important distinction to talk about and make sure that people are clear about from what you're sharing. It's still a really good point. So,
well, and because think about it, like how many things in our lives do we get upset over that we have absolutely no control over? And what's the point? I get criticized somewhat by some of my friends, kind of in a joking way, because I usually don't watch the news. And I'll ask them, like, why do I need to watch the news if it's important enough? I mean, no, by the way, I am not saying that you shouldn't watch the news. All right. I am not promoting ignorance here or saying that you should do this. But for me, if it's important enough, I'll see it on Facebook. But when I've gone over to Fox News or CNN or whatever, I look at these headlines and I'm like, man, I'm like getting upset. It's ruining my day. Like I'm affected by this. And these are things that I have nothing to do with. I have no control over. Yes. I mean, I have knowledge over it, but unless that's going to empower me, how is that helping? Like and so this is where, certainly not to promote ignorance, but like, just be careful, to your point earlier, what you're filling your mind with. Like, cause we all know people that kind of go through life, upset, and every little thing turns into a crisis, and there's problems everywhere, and the sky is falling, and so that's not going to help anybody live a better life, live a more successful life. And so I think that's one huge tip for everybody, is just realize, like, hey, in this case, we're all in this together, number one. So that's one huge thing. And I want to talk about more in a moment, another aspect of this. We're all in this together. And so we have a kind of a choice as to how we look at this. And, whether we influence it, control it, or just are concerned over it, tipping that scale in the direction that's going to empower us is super powerful. Now, to that point, Peter, one thing I think of is, like, I made a post on my Facebook page here, and let me pull it up really quickly here while you guys are like sitting here. But speaking of how we view this entire event is within our control, or at the very least, we can choose different perspectives in here. And I'll give you an example. Like, so I made this post here, and I say that, how we view this has a huge difference on what we actually feel. So, for instance, here's some of the things I wrote. What if this was an opportunity to hit reset in our lives? What if this was a chance for us to slow down? Like, and by the way, I love the use of what if. Like, it's such a great two words when placed together, because they give you so much power. What if this allowed you to slow down and focus on what's most important in life? I've been spending way more time with my wife and my daughter than I normally do. What if this revealed some weaknesses in your financial plan? Like, you've been living month to month or week to week, and it's been super tight, and you've been spending more than you should. And now this is a chance for you to be like, dang, like, this is not a good plan. And by the way, no one could have predicted a pandemic, but guess what? Like there's crises in everyone's life. Usually it's at a personal level that will knock you off that path. What if this brought you closer to God? What if this helped you focus on health? What if this made you realize that we are actually all joined and we're all in this together? I mean, there's so many different options here, but these are some of the empowering ways you can choose to look at this versus the disempowering ways. Like, and I'm not trying to minimize the fact that people are going to die. Like, that's right. I'm not saying that, but focusing on that, how is that helping you? Right. By the way, you wrote that post? I did. Are you impressed? Are you impressed? I don't know where that was a download from God, man. Like, that wasn't for me. Yeah. I imagine. So it had to be. Like, but listen, seriously. But on the serious side of things, here's the thing. I believe that this is the time what a lot of us basically come up to this fork in the road. Because you mentioned at the beginning of the episode, right? We talked about, like, there is the character, the values, the beliefs get revealed in the tough times and in the high times, right? When you are, I like that, in the tough times and in high times. But your character gets revealed in those times, right? And I think this is one of those moments when there is a fork in the road that we kind of come up and we get to choose which way do we go. Do we go into this disempowering road, right? The fear, the anger, and all that kind of stuff, or the empowering way, right? And for some people, it thinks like, I don't really have a choice, right? And that's a completely different discussion. But let's consider for a minute that we can choose the empowering way, right? Asking yourself those kinds of questions will help you to see what is that empowering way that I can take to actually make a difference, right? Because I believe that this is the time where a lot of us can step up as leaders, because this is when leaders are needed. This is where people are looking for leaders to help them to overcome to get through this, right? And when you do step up as a leader, guess what? Your whole perspective changes. It changes how you react, it changes how you have to be, changes what you say and all that kind of stuff. And your daily routine, your daily moments and everything change completely to a point where you can actually make a big difference. So
So
let me interrupt you right there, man, because one thing that is so true relating to taking the high road versus the low road, the tough times versus great times. Um, if you are someone, I want you to think about this for a moment. One of the best ways, at least I have found, to deal with crisis in my own personal life has been helping other people.
mhm,
When I can take the focus off of myself and help the people that are struggling or suffering. Now, here's my question to you, listener. If you are choosing the low road and you're focusing on fear and anger and all these other things, how effective do you think you can be at helping somebody else? I would submit
right,
to you that you can't. You're not going to be effective. You're going to be ineffective, and nobody's going to want, that's not going to help anybody. However,
right,
if you yourself choose to view this in an empowering way, in a positive way, in an optimistic way, okay, not ignorant pie in the sky, head in the sand optimism, okay, but from a place of positivity and empowerment and pouring into others, you will be much more likely to have a positive effect on somebody else, because someone's going to look at you and say, wow, like, okay, like, so even in today's challenging environment, this person has found a way to be positive and still make it not about themselves, but pour into other people. And now you can make a difference for them. And guess what? When you have that attitude, it is like dropping a pebble in a pond. And now that other person who you positively influence may become a force of positivity and influence for other people in their circles. And that's how this works. And that's why it's so
yeah,
important to do all the things we're talking about, to get around the right influences, to maybe be careful what you're feeding your mind, to choose a perspective that's empowering, to look at this in a potentially different way than you've been thinking. Ask yourself the what if question. And see how that plays out for you, because all these things have a huge influence, not only on you, but on our community. And of course, the world's made of small communities all together into one large one. And that's what's incredibly powerful.
wow, something else came out of your mouth that's pretty
Dude, we're
impactful.
right. So
What's
listen,
going on here?
I know,
Well,
man.
here's the thing. One thing that you just mentioned that I want to emphasize, you said dropping that pebble in the water, right? That has the ripple effect. Because
Yeah.
sometimes we think we have to be this big thing, right? We have to take this big action. We have to make this, be a big influencer to make a difference, right? And one example that I just want to give you is yesterday I had a call to our own community, and one of the participants on the call said, listen, I just shared an image that this participant said, I shared an image that you, Peter, posted on your Facebook feed. And since this was last week, and since then, there was 24 other people who reshared this image. So it can be a little simple thing, right? It doesn't have to be anything big. Sometimes the little actions, the little things make a huge difference. We don't know how it's going to impact somebody else, right? Calling somebody, if you get a little nudge to think of somebody in your head, right? Call them up, reach out to them. You have no idea what kind of an impact you can have. So those lower ripple effects can have a huge difference to impact a lot of people.
Totally. And small stuff. So just to wrap this all up together, times of crisis and times of conquest both reveal things about yourself. We'd ask you to ask you, look at your lives and see if you can find a pattern there. See if you see yourself responding in a certain way. And if it's in a positive way that's empowering, awesome, congratulations, that's fantastic. And if not, hey, look at what's underneath that. What's giving you that response, and where have you learned that? Try and go back and see where you've learned that, because at some point you've picked that up. Be careful what you surround yourself with and what influences you allow in your world and you expose yourself to, and then take action with this and ask yourself questions as to how you can make this positive. If you wanted this to be positive, if you wanted to find the good in this, could you, and what would that look like? Ask yourself these what if questions, reframe it, and then share that with other people. Listen, we hope you've learned something here and you've gotten something out of this. If you've enjoyed this, we would love to hear from you. Please leave us a review. Also, if you would like to be part of the Lifeonaire community, go ahead and download our app. It is free. You can go do that in the iTunes Store or Google Play, or you can find the desktop version at lifeonaire.com. And anything else, Peter, that I forgot? Like I usually botch this section. Like, did I forget anything, or did I get it all?
I think you got it all. Yeah, just come out to the community. You know,
it's awesome.
You can learn a
Yeah,
lot,
we can have
ask
conversations.
questions, and all that kind of stuff. There's a lot of empowering people there who actually help each other out. So,
yep,
and we're on
there as well. Yep, awesome. All right, everyone, we will see you next time. Be empowered, be blessed, and stay safe. See ya.